Well, the Cannabis for Private Purposes bill has been met with some disappointment, as activists are saying after nearly 2 decades to get the plant legalized, the current draft legislation is discriminatory and anti-poor. And here to give us some more context, I'm joined by Dr. Keith Scott, the South African Drug Policy Initiative, as well as the founding director of Stone Conscious Legal Minds, Ricky Stone. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Great to
Ricky, I'll start with you then. The South African Drug Policy Initiative complaining that the current bill does not reflect the spirit of the 2018 Constitutional Court ruling. In fact, they're saying it's quite, it criminalizes the poor in a sense, and it's anti-poor and doesn't give scope for those in that sector to be able to commercially trade, I suppose, with this drug and grow it in their own homes in whatever quantity. What's your take?
Yes, well, thank you very much for that. Look, I must agree with Dr. Keith Scott and the views of his organization. The bill in its present form, that of course is subject to the fact that it is still going to go through a rigorous public participation process, certainly lacks any meaningful steps towards economic emancipation of those rural farmers who have cultivated this plant for many years. But with that said, you know, the bill is reactive in a sense in that it has been drafted with the Constitutional Court privacy judgment in mind. And I guess we still have a lot to cover.
Now, as far as your view on what has been introduced, you seem to think it's introduced some far more punitive measures. Expand on that a bit.
Yes, well, I mean, certainly, you know, the Constitutional Court, per the judgment of Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, went as far as saying that it is lawful for an adult to cultivate and use cannabis within a private place, okay? So the court itself was not called upon to, and they don't have the jurisdiction to determine any limits, so to speak, but to now see limits in respect of amount of plants or amount of seeds, I think is taking us a good few years back if you look at it in respect of international trends and where we're heading in terms of international law, you know, whereas we have the opportunity to really deal with cannabis as a human rights issue that is a health and social issue as opposed to a criminal justice issue. So to see more limitations and restrictions imposed, particularly with regard to criminal sanctions. I mean, if you now cultivate 5 plants, all of a sudden you're a criminal again. What happens to that person who needs 5 plants to put into their juicer a week?
Right. Dr. Keith Scott, let me bring you in here. I mean, what are your concerns around the prescribed quantities that an adult person may possess for personal use, but not only that, that an adult person can exchange for remuneration?
Yes, well, at the South African Drug Policy Initiative, we disagree with the restrictions entirely because we're promoting the idea that we should have a legal regulation of cannabis to put it on the same regulatory frameworks as alcohol. That's the only way it's going to work. So we disagree entirely with the quantities that are allowed because we think the system is wrong. And we have to realize that the government has taken this bill to Parliament under duress. They opposed the passage of the Concord ruling all the way, implacably opposed to it. And the bill in its entirety is a complete dog's breakfast, actually. It's a mess.
So talk about that a little bit more. I mean, you basically taken a red pen and you scratched out a number of things on this bill, including you're saying the bill says that people can grow cannabis, but they can't buy seeds. How are they supposed to grow if they're not supposed to buy? How exactly does that reconcile?
Sorry, there's a lot of background noise coming from your studio. I can't hear the question.
I'm saying, what are some of the issues that you're raising here, including the fact that the bill is saying that people can grow cannabis, but they can't buy seeds? How did the writers of this bill reconcile those two things?
Yeah, as far as I know, the bill does allow you to buy seeds, but it is a bit of a grey area. And that is why we suggest that you legally regulate cannabis in the same way that you regulate alcohol, because the problem with the bill as it stands, it discriminates against the millions of people in South Africa who cannot grow cannabis because they've got no private space. They live in tiny shacks where a lot of people live, and they just haven't got space, and they haven't got space to smoke cannabis because you're not allowed to smoke it around children. You're not allowed to smoke it out of a window, according to the bill. If you go out into the road, then you smoke it in public, which is illegal, according to the bill. So, a lot of the arguments around the bill are spurious. What we need to do is legally regulate cannabis, and the simplest way that we can do it is use the model that we've done for alcohol, because anybody can make alcohol at home. Legally, they can. You could make beer, you can make wine, you can have a small wine farm, you can have your own brand. It's not only the big companies that got it. You can have an artisanal brewery, et cetera, et cetera. Why can't we do that with cannabis? It's a simple concept. People understand the laws about alcohol, and we don't have to go round and round in circles and reinvent the wheel. It's quite simple. Cannabis is a far less harmful drug than alcohol, far less harmful. Alcohol causes 8 types of cancer, causes cirrhosis, pancreatitis, osteoporosis, heart disease, etc. Cannabis, very few illnesses. So let's just put it in the same structure as we use to legalize alcohol, and it'll be far easier to legislate.
Now, the South African Parliament recently calling for public comments on this bill. Do you have any confidence in that process?
Well, I have a lot of confidence that people will make contributions, will make comments, but I have my reservations about the intention of the government to follow the public, because, as I pointed out, the government has been the problem in delaying progressive cannabis laws in this country. They've fought in the Cape High Court and in the Constitutional Court. They were the ones that fought against it. So I have absolutely no faith that the government, the Central Drug Authority, and the ministries concerned will in any way help to create progressive cannabis law. So we've got a problem on our hands because they've got all the power.
Ricky, yourself, are you confident in the work that Parliament is going to do to rectify this bill?
Sorry, I had to take a deep breath. I don't know if that's a trick question. I must echo Dr. Keith's comments there. But there is some positivity, in that the Eastern Cape governments have recently gone out onto tender to look for an expert advisory committee to help them craft policy. So within some silos, certainly on the provincial level, you're seeing there are government departments and indeed provincial leaderships which are going out there looking to craft an all-inclusive policy. And I guess that is the clarion call that we need to put forward to government, and we need them to answer, is that this bill, bearing in mind it is a new law, it's not that it's an amendment to the Drugs Trafficking Act or to the Medicines Act, as Minister Mkhize passed on 22 May. So this is new law. Therefore, new law should be framed by policy. And unfortunately, where we are going to fall behind as a nation, where we should be leading the cannabis industry, at least in Africa.
Yeah. Ricky, I appreciate...
could go saying internationally.
Yeah.
Need policy. You simply cannot draft law without a clear political direction. So again, it comes down to political will,
All right, Ricky, we're going to have to leave it there for tonight. Much appreciated. Thank you very much, Ricky Stone. He's the founding director of Stone Conscious Legal Minds. Also, Dr. Keith Scott from the South African Drug Policy